Should my kids have social media? Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast.
I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler.
We're brothers,
We're therapists.
and we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
Hey, Tyler, you ready to have some hard conversations?
Let's do it.
Let the Therapy Brothers podcast begin. All right, Tyler, before we get into that, I just wanted to share a review that we got, and just love the reviews and love sharing these reviews every once in a while. So this one says extremely helpful. And it says, I have loved this show. It has helped me see things within myself that I can work on. Brannon and Tyler do great work in helping others without taking an approach that is shaming to those struggling with pornography.
Awesome. Thank you. We got quite a few reviews when we did that drawing for the Rising Sun, and this was one of those, I think. And we so appreciate your support. We appreciate your feedback, and we're glad that there's some good being done in the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, Tyler, before we get into it, how's life for you?
man, life is really good for me, man. I'm kind of like a kid at Christmas time. We have the Rising Sun retreat that's going to happen like 3 days after we are recording this right now. So that's all I think about is just, it's like the build up to.
You go into like beast mode. You go into, he like doesn't sleep. He doesn't eat. He just like focuses in on Rising Sun.
It's like I feel like a meth addict without taking the meth, but I
feel guilty every year we do it. I'm like, there goes another 10 years off Tyler's life.
I love it so much. I get so excited about it that it's like that's all I can think about. So that's kind of what's been on my mind for the last week. But I'm really excited about it. So that's been the buildup. That's how life is right now.
Yeah. It's exciting. We got it on Thursday, and
yep.
I'm just excited to meet the men that are coming and just be with them. So yeah, it's gonna be good times.
Yeah.
So, well, Tyler, should our kids have social media?
This is a question we get all the time, right, Brannon? And it's people ask it as if it's like a straight yes or no question. And I think you and I don't know, we never actually really talked about this on our show much, so we might even have a slight difference of opinion on this. But we get the question a lot, and so we're gonna have a discussion on it today.
Yeah, I think doing what we do, Tyler, in terms of treating addiction. This social media thing's really fascinating because I think you and I can both see just a lot of the problems and the dangers with social media, and also we see a lot of people addicted to it, which is actually most people. And so on several fronts, it's problematic. And I don't think our discussion today is to shame anyone or make anyone feel bad about their use of social media or their kids' use of social media. But hopefully as we talk about it today, we can talk about certain things that can really get you thinking about how to actually manage it and handle it and deal with it.
Right. Yeah. So there's kind of like, I think what we'll probably end up talking about is some dialectics today about both the pros and the cons of why you would or you wouldn't want your kids to have social media, or why, let's just even broaden it out, why you listening should or shouldn't have social media, and how you might be able to use it effectively versus non-effectively.
Yeah, but be sure to follow our Instagram page at Therapy Brothers.
Right, exactly.
Find me at Brannon_Patrick on Instagram.
Right, yeah. That's actually, Brannon, it's funny that you bring that up that way, Brannon, because for the last probably 3, 4, 5 years, I guess maybe I'll even back up even further. When I started working my recovery a long time ago, whenever that was, 2005, 2006, whatever that was, one of the things that I did is I removed all internet from my phone, and I actually removed myself from all social media. And I did that, and I actually stayed off of all social media for about 8 years. And then I started to I brought back Facebook a little bit, and then I took it back off because I just didn't like how it made me feel. And then I just barely got onto like Instagram just a couple of years ago. So I'm tech stupid, because I just I didn't do anything. And when I started this practice here, Chase, my brother-in-law and our partner, he kept coming to me and saying, Tyler, you need to have a presence on all the social media platforms. You need to be on Instagram, you need to be on Twitter, you need to be on Facebook, you need to be on all this stuff. And I just didn't want to do it. but I have accounts for all those things, and I post on those things regularly now in the hopes that there's going to be some good that comes from whatever I post, and that I can make a difference in the world on some small level. And yet I still find myself struggling to want to use those things. And part of it's because I was so deeply burned so long ago that I kind of got this, like, I don't want to touch the fire kind of thing. And I'd say my relationship with social media is almost unhealthy in the other direction of, like, being very leery of it. Does it make sense?
Yes. Yeah. And you know what, Tyler, you might be missing out on some positive things because of that.
Yes.
But at the same time, I think it's okay. Like, you didn't die when you were off social media for 8 years. I don't know how you're here today.
No, life actually got better, shockingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there were some things that were sacrificed in that, Brannon. You know, I lost contact with almost all of my old friends from high school. I lost contact with, and I could have kept contact in other ways, but I didn't take the initiative to make the phone call or to go and drive down and meet somebody. Where the social and a lot of people are so into the social media scene that's where a lot of that communication takes place. And so there were some things I did miss out on. Some things I feel like I, maybe missed some level of connection with certain people, but by and large, you're right. I did survive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cost benefit thing, but it kind of gets messed up a little bit. So if you take a cost benefit to use of social media and how we use it, there's a lot of benefits, but it does come at a cost of we waste some time, we numb out. But there's this other part of it, Tyler, that I think is not talked about very often. I can talk about how I hopped on YouTube on Saturday, and the video on YouTube showed me how to reprogram my garage door, and I could have never done that without YouTube. Like, thank goodness for YouTube.
Yes.
Love it. That's amazing. But there's this thing, cost benefit is there, but there's also this addictive nature to it. And we've got to be honest with ourselves about it, where, all of a sudden you're off in La La Land for an hour and a half, looking at people do a dance to the new jingle that's out, over and over again. or looking at people like fall off skateboards, or cats do funny things, like, for an hour and a half. And for that hour and a half, it's just like, oh my gosh, like, I don't have to worry about it. And it is everything. Don't have to worry about the stress with this, that, whatever. Just like, all I have to do is watch this funny cat. And it works, and it works well.
Really well.
Yeah. So that's why, spouses will disappear when they go to the bathroom. You think they're doing their business, but they're actually on the toilet there for like an hour and a half, just watching TikTok.
Come out with deep vein thrombosis in their legs and a hemorrhoid.
Yeah, we laugh
because they sat there so long.
This is reality that we're living in now, right? So it's very, very addicting and very entertaining, informative. So, Tyler, and we're not going to get too political here, but you're big into guns, right?
I love guns.
Okay. So, and you've raised your kids, when your daughter, let's say your youngest, when she was 12, would you have just handed her a gun and not trained her on it, not said much about it? Like, here you go.
No, of course not. Yeah. You teach them.
Now, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, because that would be irresponsible. That would be dangerous. It would be a health hazard. It would not be good parenting.
Is this a fair comparison with social media that I'm making?
Well, I think with the risks that come with social media, yes. Like, if you're using the analogy in the sense that, a gun that's not treated with the right kinds of boundaries and guidelines becomes a dangerous instrument. Otherwise, it's not really dangerous at
So
all.
a gun can be useful and good in some ways,
Yeah,
and a gun can
exactly.
be destructive and harmful in some ways.
Yes.
Correct?
I think there's a little bit of a difference there to your analogy that then ties into I think what you're trying to say here is the difference between a gun and something like social media is the gun itself by nature is not built to be addictive.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's true.
But social media, every platform is built to be addictive. And so otherwise I think the metaphor actually holds true that if we were to teach our children the right kinds of, and this is what's so funny about this, us as parents, if we teach our children what's the right way to handle social media, while I just spent an hour and a half on YouTube yesterday, it's like there's something to that, but that's the essence of the nature of what we're dealing with is that it'd be like walking your kid into that place and saying, into a liquor store and saying, hey, take your pick, unless there's some kind of education, unless there's some kind of guideline, unless there's some kind of like boundary and structure to it that's going to help them to not succumb to the addictive design of these platforms.
Yeah. So when you say, I want to back up a little bit, these are designed to be addictive. That's a pretty bold statement. But why would you say that?
Well, because things hum merrily along on money and advertising dollars come from views, and views come from time spent on the app, and so there's a constant competition among all these platforms and our typical normal just media use to get eyeballs on the screens. And so you look at like the certain kinds of features that get added to these social media places, the like button, what does that do?
Yeah.
Well, it helps the algorithm. So if you guys like our stuff, we love that. But like, what it does is it dumps that little piece of dopamine to you, like, oh, somebody was watching, and then you go back and you see how many thumbs up you got, or
so it's addicting on that end. If you're the creator, you're addicted to getting the likes and the
yeah,
the hits.
you post your trip to Mexico, and everyone's like thumbs up, or oh, I'm so jealous. I wish I was in Mexico too. Like, oh, there's that little piece of dopamine that comes through. I'm going to be back on there looking to see who else posted, who else commented on my stuff, and it gives us some form, or at least it feels like some form of connection, even though it's not really a deep level of connection a lot of the time when it's through that like and subscribe, but it's addictive. It's like a rat that has the water laced with cocaine in its cage, and once in a while it's just like, oh, I'll just go hit that again. Let me just go hit that again.
Yeah.
And so it's constantly pulling us back. I mean, if you're listening to this show, think about it. How many of you listening have decided to go on a week-long or a month-long fast from social media and barely made it if you did, felt better afterwards if you made it, and then went right back to it?
Sounds like addiction.
Right?
Yeah.
It's built to be addictive.
Well, Tyler, you think about like Reels, Shorts, TikToks. It's like if you take a step back and just kind of watch what's happened over the last 10 years, it's kind of refined itself down to the things that hit the dopamine receptors really quickly and work, right? So why is a 30-second clip of a video so addicting, right? It used to be stories on Instagram, and people still do those things, right? Post stories, whatever. But these short videos are taking over the world, and they even have certain like songs that and jingles that'll be like, hey, this jingle works with this setting. So if you have a nature setting with this music and whatever, then it just like, it almost intoxicates people to watch it again and again and again. And the goal is to get as many views and as many hits as you possibly can. And so we're all complicit. We're all in on this to create the most addicting thing we can create so that we all watch it. Right.
Right.
It's really fascinating. It's a fascinating social thing that's going on right now. And I want to come back to kids for a second, Tyler. So you take your 12, 14-year-old. What's going on in their brain at that time of life?
I mean, the brain still is completely still forming. You don't even really have a fully formed brain until you're in your 20s. And so there's a lot of development that's happening physiologically. There's a lot of socialization that's happening inside of the brain. There's a lot of habit formation taking place. And I mean, we could go down the list of things that are going on for an adolescent brain. But there's a reason. There's a reason why we, at least legally, made alcohol have to wait till 21. And one of those reasons why is for the same reasons we're talking about now as social media.
Well, the research has clearly shown if I start drinking when I'm 12, I'm much more likely to become alcohol being a problem in my life. If I start early on putting that through my brain.
The earlier you start, the more likely the problems.
Yeah. What we're learning when we're that young is things like emotion regulation, impulse control. Our brain is developing, and what's really good for us in those times is to learn how to deal with pain, learn how to deal with difficulty, and so when you throw a phone in front of a child, and on that phone is all this social media, in those moments of pain, in those moments of having to deal with the discomfort, they can instantly take it away. And so what it does is it takes away the development of that brain into learning how to regulate themselves, how to deal with their impulse control, all of those type of things, right?
Exactly. And it goes along with some of the research. There's a couple of pieces of research that are pretty prominent here in this area. One is the idea of dopamine itself, that anything that we can pursue with very little effort but get maximum dopamine is the risk of a big time addiction.
Yep.
When we earn our dopamine, it's actually beneficial. So what you're saying is, like, when our kid has to go out and ride their bike up the hill to go off a jump or something, the dopamine that comes from that is going to be the healthy form of dopamine that's not as addictive as the kid who can just get on the internet and watch those things and go like, whoa, that's amazing. Or, oh, let me numb out for a minute because I'm feeling bored or something. That's going to be addictive because there was no effort to get the dopamine hit.
Are
right?
you saying I got to eat my potato skins and my brown rice instead of white rice?
You actually have to chew your food.
I have to process stuff like I don't just get the white whatever powder.
Which actually, if we were to get into the whole idea of breathing and everything else, that's a whole nother episode. But chewing our food actually makes a difference to the benefit of our lives. So we'll go that way a different day. But
right. But the principle is, and what you're talking about is, dopamine is designed for us to get it when we get like it's a payoff, right? So
when you've worked for it, it's
yeah,
good
like
for you
when I run 5 miles and at the end of that I feel this high and the endorphins are there and it feels good. That's healthy. That's really good. But if I take away any of the work for it and I just get the dopamine, then I'm going to, just like a rat in a cage in an experiment, I'm going to go back to that dopamine again and again and again and again until I start what happens to my brain, Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, you start to actually rewire your brain because the brain is smart and says, if you keep giving me this amount of dopamine, it's going to kill me unless I adjust. So then it starts to actually make it so it doesn't pick up dopamine quite as easily. And then we get more depressed. And then we wonder why we're not so depressed. So then we go back to the very thing that used to make us feel better. And that's the thing that's actually causing our brain to go, you're going to kill me. I better
need a bigger hit.
I'm going to get more and more depressed because I'm not going to pick up as much dopamine. And then that's where we need more, something more novel or something more often or something more intense. And that's the nature of addiction, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting because you have that going on with social media, the risk of that. And that's the part that I believe is designed by the companies that do it. At the same time that you have the social element going on, and this is also something that's been shown in research, that there's a direct correlation between how depressed you are and how much time you spend on social media.
Yeah.
People who spend a lot of time on social media are by nature more depressed. And so... Right. And that's a social comparison thing. That's not just the dopamine thing we're talking about. That's also the lust thing, in the sense of like, I'm looking at everybody else's life and lusting after whatever it is I don't have. And then there's the competition part of you that's trying to then post your own stuff to show how good you are. And then it fuels all of the stuff that we don't really believe in, the mask and the false self, instead of just living your true authentic life because of the pressure that you feel to keep up.
So it's, Tyler, it's interesting because, we talk about the roots to problems, the trauma, right? Trauma produces shame and then leads to not knowing yourself and all of those things. And it's interesting because social media it's a double whammy. It's really addictive because of the dopamine hit. But then it also, in a way, inflicts its own forms of like subtle trauma. Where if I'm a 12-year-old girl, let's say, and I'm hopping on there and looking at all these other beautiful girls that I don't think I can live up to, and getting messages from everywhere else that that's what you should be, and I can't quite get there, and I wish that I was, how am I going to feel?
Yeah, exactly. There's that comparison game that comes by nature of being a child. And then you see that group of kids that you thought you were friends with is off doing something that you didn't get invited to. And then there's that feeling of rejection that comes with it. Not to mention the bullying that happens.
Those kids are just posting the good, grand, awesome stuff going on in their life. They don't post when they're in their bedroom alone, feeling lonely and isolated.
That's just it. They go to the movie and post, and then they go home at night and they get on their phone and be like, oh,
and they everyone else, same way as
everyone
the other
else
kid.
did something fun without me.
Yeah,
because our brains are keyed to focus on the negative anyway, because that's how we've survived for so many years. And so even the positives, they're not getting the benefit out of the positive of having been in the movie, because all they could think about was getting on to post about how cool they are, and then they go home and then they sit and go, "Oh, I missed out on everything."
It does crack me up, Tyler, when I go to a concert or the Grand Canyon or whatever, and like. I'm sitting there in awe of what's going on, listening to the music, and like everybody's just trying to film it. It's just, put your phone away and just be in the moment of this miraculous thing.
What's so amazing, that analogy too, because we just went to the Grand Canyon last year, Brannon, it was no single picture or video can actually do justice to what being in person at the Grand Canyon actually elicits in your body.
Right.
And you're going to miss it if you don't just sit and soak it in. Right. Yeah.
What's funny, Tyler, as we're talking, people might feel called out. And the reality is when we talk about this, we are calling people out because it's epidemic. Like, I struggle with all this stuff.
Me too. I do too.
I have limits on my phone, and I have somebody else holds the password to get past those limits on my phone, because I know that my brain wants to push those limits. And so I know I got 10 minutes on Instagram every day, and that's it. And the reason I do it is because I post on there all the time. And so I want to know what's going on there, but I also don't want to spend 2 hours a day on Instagram.
Yes.
And so it is addicting. I think it's really smart to have some things in place to make sure that you're safe and to make sure that you're healthy. Tyler, I bought one of those things. It's like a bin that you can put your phone in, and you can set a timer, and it locks it, and you cannot get in. Your phone's just locked for like 2.5 hours.
You lock yourself out of the phone.
So I put it in there at like 4 until my kids went to bed, and then be like, okay. Well, I had a problem. My son set it for 5 days. he threw my phone in there.
That was maybe a message, Dad.
Yeah, I've gone away from my phone, from the bin for a little while. But,
well, the funny thing about those things, I've always thought those are a good idea. The challenge is it's like, you think about, and this will tell you how addicted you are. You think about going and putting your phone in a bin like that and locking it for any period of time, 3-4 hours. And you can't do it because you're like shaking. You're like Lord of the Rings, my precious. Like, oh, my precious. Like, I can't. Right. Like, it's like you've got a problem at that point.
Yes.
And and I like what you said, Brannon, that you've kind of found, and this is what's challenging, is we have to be honest with ourselves about this. You found some methods to try to make sure that you're not overdoing it. and you do it in a certain way. You put time limits on yours. For me, I don't have any social media on my phone. So if I want to get on my social media, it has to be on my computer, which then I'm never around my computer more than
Right.
I don't have time to get on very much on my computer. So that's what I found that works for me. I think about working with kids. I don't know. I'd be really interested to know what you're doing with your kids. We held our kids off on any phone in general until the age of 15. Although we cheated a little bit on our last daughter. She uses a family phone now.
Yeah.
in quotes.
My kids did that for a while.
But for the most part, we held them off till 15, and then we didn't allow them to have social media on their phones. They had social media accounts that they could log into on either their mom's phone or on the home computer, and that was our way of trying to let them at least have the taste of the social media without having all the freedom. And I actually, to be honest with you, looking at it now, wish I would have even been maybe a little longer before they got their phones, and maybe even a little bit more involved in their social media use.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a little different. So my son just started 7th grade, and we just got him a phone. Here's a couple things that are going on that are interesting. And, us, when we were raised, like the internet wasn't even out. We were just coming away from black and white TVs.
We were just in we were right on the edge of dial-up internet.
Yeah. I mean, we still had phones with like cords and stuff.
The phone that had the cord that wrapped around the whole house.
Yeah. So, and so for me, it's easy to just go to this place of like, oh, to my son, like, oh, you need a phone? That's ridiculous. Get over it. I didn't have one, And the truth is like, this is what I didn't realize. If you don't have a phone, at least where I live, when you're 12, like you're one of the weirdos.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Right. The other thing is schools are using the technology and the phones. Like my 15-year-old, she needs a phone for school. And we actually use the phone in some really good ways when it comes to my kids' schooling. Checking up on their grades. My wife gets alerts sent to her of like how far behind my son is in science. He loves that.
Yeah, I'm sure he loves that.
Yeah. But I'd say we're pretty conservative when it comes to what happens on those phones with our kids. There's a couple things that we do. To me, we just don't allow social media. And it's not that we don't allow it. That's not the approach we come to with them. We're on a team and we're working together, and they choose not to have social media, influenced by their parents who
with discussion really,
and like push them not to have it. And we talk about how one day they'll have it, and that's great, and that's awesome, and their phone will be theirs and their life will be theirs. But while I own your phone and while we're doing this thing while you're growing up, like I set a limit on things like games. I think my son gets 10 minutes a day playing a game on his phone. I want to expose them enough. But that there's this one social media app called Be Real. Have you ever heard of that?
Mm-mm.
So we let them do that, and it's really honestly kind of lame. It's not very addicting. It's like it's people being real. It's like they got to take a picture of like, yeah, I'm sitting on the couch, like
people are trying to force themselves to look as normal as possible.
Yeah, like be normal, take a picture. Okay, oh wow. So that's the only one that we use, and I don't want to cocoon them and shelter them, and because the reality is this is the world that we're living in. But I also don't want to open the floodgates while their precious little brains are developing, and I want to allow them to learn how to deal with some things, discomfort and things. And we still struggle. I went to the football game with my son the other night, and he was on it, like he was trying to find a way to be on his phone all night. And it's like your phone's completely locked down. what are you like playing on your calculator? Like, I don't know what you're doing, you know?
He's like trying to crack the
I
code.
I got to do anything to get on this phone, you know? And, but that's okay. Like, that's part of the learning process of like, okay, like what are we doing? Like, where's the balance here?
Yeah.
But when I say I'm conservative, I really, my kids, when they turn 18 or whatever, they take their phones over. Heck, like download Instagram, whatever you want to do. But while you're at my house, while I'm paying for your phone, we're not going to do that stuff. So
I think you point out a couple of things. One is helping your kids understand your reasons behind why you're doing the things you do is really important, and looking at good health. And I would say we probably lean a little bit towards we're the weird ones too because of that. My kids rarely are on social media at all. My daughters, they're not even allowed to touch Snapchat, anything like that. And you said something that I think is interesting, that we do live in this world, and I'm not very tech savvy because I shut myself off for like 8 years from technology stuff in order to get my recovery going, and now I wish that I had a little bit more tech savviness, right? But my life is far better now than it was otherwise, because I was mismanaging it, because I was one of those people who kind of got swallowed up by things going from dial up to something else and not knowing what was happening to me, and then getting caught up in like unhealthy habits, right? Whether that was video games or addiction. You look at our world, Brannon. I mean, look at the epidemic that we have of suicidality and other forms of addiction and depression and mental health issues. And you can't not look at the fact that the world and social media is a part of that. What's wrong with your kid being weird? Like, weird, in this case, weird means healthy. Like, it's like, yeah, my kid's not addicted to stuff yet. My kid's not as depressed as they could be. And they might be a little bit behind the 8 ball and having to figure out the technology side of things, but they're going to get that because they're in school, like you said. That's the world they live in otherwise. I think it's really important to be teaching our kids those things, and to being serious about them, as serious as you would be with the way you teach your kid about handling a gun, like you said earlier, or touching substances with alcohol or other kinds of hard drugs. Like, you're going to want to educate your kids about those things, because there is such a high price to pay when they become mistreated.
Well, you know what's interesting, Tyler, and I don't want to like trigger anybody's guilt here, but we think that it's good parenting to help our children not feel any discomfort. Like, I'm being a good parent if I'm taking care of them and they don't feel discomfort. And so oftentimes a lazy parent will be one that throws the iPad in front of their kid's face as fast as they can. You're sad, you're upset, you're whatever. Here. You like, fix it with this game, fix it with this. And it's the parent that is willing to sit in the discomfort of their child learning how to work through their emotions is doing a good job as a parent.
Yeah.
Right. And we've all done it. We've all numbed our kids out. We've all numbed ourselves out. Right. But I think we can get in habits where it's so easy to get the kid to shut up, to get the kid to feel okay, to whatever, to just give them the hit of dopamine that's right there for the taking.
Right.
Where the child needs to go cry in a pillow for a little while, right? Or go, with my kids, we make them. Mom used to do this. Brilliant parenting tactic. We call it the harmony chairs, where it's like you sit across from each other and work this out together until your heart is at peace. And if your heart's not at peace, you'll sit here.
You guys can chill there for as long as you want to.
Yeah, that's your choice.
Oh man, the hours I spent sitting across the room from you, staring at you, like, I want to punch you in the face, and then like, but I want to go play roller hockey outside. Like, okay, Brannon, I'm sorry. Are you sorry?
I'm sorry, I was a jerk. Yeah, but the thing about it is making them sit there and do that. There's no way my kids are holding their phone while they're sitting on those chairs.
No way.
Right? Like, they're looking at each other in the eye, having to figure out this relationship thing with their sibling. So like you don't seek out causing your children pain. You do sometimes, but you don't seek out causing your children pain so much. But also, when pain is there, opportunity for growth is there for your children, and it's your job to guide them to learn how to navigate through that, not to be the anesthesiologist. You're the parent, right?
Right.
So
Exactly. And it's about tooling your kids up to cope. So when your kid, when you, when your son's just like going to town on that phone trying to unlock it to be able to like play with it and stuff, like, good, let him struggle. Let him struggle, and then talk to him a little bit about what it's like to struggle that way, and why, and maybe lead into like why that feels so compulsive to him, right? Like, then you teach him a few emotion regulation skills, and you teach him.
He's got his phone now. Wait till he discovers his penis.
Oh man! Holy cow! Yeah, exactly. Like the coping, right? Like, but being there along the way to do the teaching. I'm sure you've watched, this is an older show now. It was pretty groundbreaking when it came out, called The Social Dilemma. Have you watched The Social Dilemma?
Oh my gosh. Everybody needs to see that.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it,
I don't know if it's still on Netflix or what, but
I think it's still on Netflix.
It's disturbing.
It actually really got me thinking differently about the things we're talking about now. And I did like some of the practical things that they mentioned, kind of what you were saying, living in the world that we do. There are some things that can at least help you to be a little bit more healthy with it. And it's simple things like turn off all notifications so you're not getting a ding or a buzz all day long. So then when you go there, you're going there of your own choice and your own fruition, rather than just being talk about being addicted. Like, this is why they're designed the way they are, is to get you back on there, to spend more time on there, that kind of stuff. Set things down. Like, if you're going to watch a show, put your phone somewhere across the room.
Isn't that crazy that it's difficult for us to watch a movie now?
Yeah.
Because we used to be addicted to TV and movies, but now it's like, oh man, I got to work to watch that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like phone, it's like in front of my face.
We sit down to watch a family movie night last week. And I'm sitting there watching the movie, and all of a sudden I get a notification, like a text from a client or something. So I start reading it. My girl's like, "Dad, like, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, sorry." And then 5 minutes later, I look up, and both of my daughters are zoned out on their phones. And I'm watching a family movie, Rapunzel or something by myself. Like, just like, what the heck? Like, this is so difficult. It is a constant like maintenance thing. It's really, really difficult. But yeah, that show had a few kind of just simple things. Like, for me, it helped me decide to take my stuff off my phone, because that's where I was misusing it. But everyone's going to be a little bit different, but you can start thinking about how can it be healthy. And I've got news for everyone listening. It will only be healthy if you harness it with proper boundaries for yourself, because it's designed to not want boundaries.
Yeah.
And doing it for your children too is a gift that you'll give them, even though you'll take a lot of flack from them over the next several years while they're teenagers.
Well, and Tyler, I got to say, if the cat is already out of the box, it's hard to go backwards. It's hard to, like if your kid is just running wild with it, as a parent, you might be concerned and thinking, oh, what do I do now? Like, I wish I could go back and have handled this differently. And I do think it's going to be challenging and hard. What I would say is try to work with them in having them be a part of wanting to be healthy, rather than you going and just taking it away or setting limits, and then they'll just push away from you and do it underground and things like that. But try to build that relationship of trust and love, so that they know you're on their side and you're trying to help them manage it. And then the other thing is to set a good example and manage it well yourself.
Yeah.
I
think that's maybe the last thought that I would have too, Brannon, is we almost like talking about this topic about our kids, because it's its own form of like putting the spotlight somewhere where we don't want it to be, which should be on us.
Totally.
We if anything we talk about with our kids should be something that we're willing to look at with ourselves and say, you know what, if I'm honest with myself, these would be the right limits for me too.
No question.
And eventually, like ultimately, that's going to be the best way, because we'll be healthier, we'll be more present with our kids, we'll be more in tune with what their needs are, and we'll be setting the example of what it looks like to have good health with these things in our lives, rather than just dictating to them while we're doing the exact opposite.
Yeah, and I don't think, Tyler, when we talk about recovery, when you apply shame to try to be better, it doesn't work.
No.
So it's nothing to feel bad about. I mean, we've all got kind of caught up in this thing that has caught us off guard, that's amazingly addictive and very interesting.
Yep.
But can we take a step back and say, okay, like, just like sugar, just like anything in our lives that can get out of control, like, let's take a step back and look at this and say, hey, how do I manage this? Because I want to be the healthiest version of me that I can be. And whatever that looks like, I want to work toward that. So I'll make this difficult sacrifices. If my brain is telling me, whoa, I want that dopamine so badly, I'll sit and go through the withdrawals if I need to, in order to get back to regulation, in order to get back to some balance in my life.
Absolutely. Good topic, Brannon. And I've made you sitting here talking. I'm like, I got to go home and do better myself.
Yeah, that's good. So hopefully this was helpful. We just wanted to have a discussion, and Tyler and I are coming to this from our angle and where we come from. We're pretty conservative, but we're also addiction therapists, and we definitely we can see the issues. There's a big billboard on I-15 right now that says something like 80% of adolescent girls are addicted to social media. So we don't have a ton of research about it, but if they started doing research, I think it could be pretty staggering. And so it's something we definitely need to talk about. So thank you for listening. Hopefully you got something out of it. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.